started on our agenda for this evening. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Seeing now, we'll move on to public comment. Is there anybody here to speak on the budget tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to staff reports. Do you have any?
No staff reports this evening.
Elected official reports?
I don't know it's a report. I got a call from Dr. Cont'd today saying that they were extending a helping hand to those in Wheat Ridge who are experiencing any losses to the flood. I asked her what specifically that meant, and she said, I don't know. If you have something, let us know, and we'll see if we can't help you. So it's sort of an open thing.
Any other elected officials? Okay, we'll move on to the budget presentation.
Great. Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Council, thank you. We are here tonight to present you the 2014 proposed budget. We have our executive management team here. I think everybody knows everybody. Everybody met Scott, right? He's been at a council meeting, so glad to have him aboard. So we'll go ahead and get started. I know a few of you have to be out by 8, I believe, so we'll try to get as much done tonight as we can. 7:30? Some of us have to get out by 7:30, so I'll skip the first 20 pages. You all ready, Joe? You ready? Okay. So as you all know, we have a vision here in Wheat Ridge, and we like to make sure that we refer back to this as we are planning any initiative in the city, and budget is one of those things. And so the Wheat Ridge Vision 2025, just to remind everybody, Wheat Ridge is a beautiful city and a community for families. Wheat Ridge has great neighborhoods, vibrant activity centers, and multimodal transportation. Wheat Ridge residents enjoy an active, healthy lifestyle and hometown feeling and pride. Wheat Ridge, a great place to live. And then City Council recently reaffirmed their goals and made a couple little tweaks to some of the wording, actually. So our Wheat Ridge goals for the next 5 years are economically viable commercial areas, financially sound city providing exceptional service, choice of desirable neighborhoods, and more attractive Wheat Ridge. So if you read your budget message, you'll see that we broke down quite a few of the budget proposed expenses into those different goal areas to show you how your budget is meeting your goals. So we look at just some general over highlights before we start getting deep into the budget. Our proposed 2014 general fund budget, we actually had to make some cuts, as we do on an annual basis. Departments submit what they think they need on an annual basis to provide the services and programs they do. Unfortunately, we can't fund everything. We can only fund what we can afford to pay for. So actually there was probably more cuts than this, but I think the last round of cuts to get a balanced budget, we did have to eliminate or postpone about $845,000 in budget requests from the departments. One new item that we added as part of this budget process this year was creation of a contingency fund, an account. So you can imagine most budgets have a lot of contingency, miscellaneous dollars budgeted for things that might happen. And we were able to compile and consolidate all of those across the city, and that was able to save us about $70,000, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And that's part of our priority-based budgeting process. This kind of our fiscal health, really looking at our budget, making sure we understand what we're spending, making sure that what we're spending is meeting those end results that we're really looking at. Fortunately, we are able to propose a transfer to the capital budget next year of $1.7 million. To do this, though, we had to decrease our unrestricted fund balance down to our minimum, which is 17%. So that's probably a discussion point for council. That is our minimum reserve level per council policy. Look at a little bit of our longer-term budget picture. We're still experiencing a perpetual systemic revenue expenditure gap. I just told you we still have to cut to balance our budget on an annual basis. unfortunately, our revenues just don't necessarily keep up with the expenses and the programs and services we'd like to provide. So we're continuing somewhat of a deferral of capital and maintenance projects to fill that growing gap on an annual basis. I think, for our long-term budget picture in the city, we're going to have to continue working on educating our public and implementing a plan for increasing revenues and actually just getting the public to understand what programs and services cost and what they're willing to pay for. So I think that's going to be a long-term project that we're going to have to continue working on. And of course, economic development, which I'm happy to say is I think, fruitful for the city over the last couple years, and I see hopefully good things in the next couple of years with economic development, which will help us increase that revenue base. It's not coming soon enough, though. So if you look at our budget, just some bigger numbers. The total proposed budget for 2014, this is all funds. Revenues we're projecting at about $34 million. Again, this is all budgets, general fund, capital, and our, I believe, 7 special revenue funds. We're projecting a beginning fund balance next year of about $12 million, so we should have about $47 million total available funds in 2014. The revenue projection is about a 12% decrease compared to what we're estimating this year. That's primarily because we had quite a few grants in the CIP budget this year. Projecting an ending fund balance at the end of next year of just under $10 million. That's about a 1.4% increase compared to this year's budget. So if you break that budget down into all of our different funds, you'll see it here in this pie chart. First of all, we're proposing an expenditure level of about $37 million. Again, this includes all of our funds, the general fund, which is, you can barely see it up there, but hopefully you can see it on your handout. The general fund is the biggest piece of the pie. About 77% of our budget is comprised of the general fund. The CIP budget is the next largest, just under 11%. And then we have 7 special revenue funds. We'll talk about those in more detail later, but the Recreation Center Fund and Open Space Fund are 2 of those largest budgets. This total proposed expenditure is about a 20% decrease compared to what we budgeted this year. Again, a lot of that is probably due to the CIP budget. We had most of those grant-funded projects this year, so that's the majority of that decrease. I think actually the general fund may be decreasing a tad also. No, it's an increase. Here you go. Here's the next slide. So now we talk about specifically the general fund. This is our general operating budget that pays for our daily operating expenditures. Revenues, we are projecting just over or just under $28 million in revenues with a beginning fund balance of just under $10 million, so total available funds next year at the beginning of the year of just under $38 million. The projected revenues of $28 million we're projecting about a 1.7% increase compared to what we projected for revenues for this year. And as you all know, our largest revenue source is sales and use tax. So, yes, sorry. Yep. Which one? The total available funds? Oh, revenues. The total available funds or the... 579. It is correct, and you win the prize. Thanks, Christy. And what did she win, Heather? Sorry about that. It is 579. They all want to double check our math. So it's just an error. It's just an error in the PowerPoint presentation, not the budget. So, yeah. So looking at revenues for the general fund, again, sales tax and use tax are our largest revenue sources. Almost 70% comes from sales and use tax. Our other sources are in more detail in your budget book under revenues and expenditures, but you can see there's fairly small portion of our budget. And we do show property tax on here. You all know that's not a large revenue source. It's just under 3%. So it's a small piece of the pie. So our expenditures for 2014 for our general fund budget, same as revenues, as our projected revenues of just under $28 million. So it's a balanced budget based on what we project we're bringing in revenues next year. I was right. This is it's about a 1% decrease compared to our adopted budget this year. So we're not projecting or proposing an increase for next year. This will leave us an ending fund balance, total fund balance at the end of next year of just under $8 million. However, if you see only about $4.7 million of that is unrestricted, and that's the 17%. So what that really means is you as a council and me as a city manager only have discretion with the 4.7 to spend on anything we want. The difference between that, the 8 and the 4.7, are restricted funds for the Tabor required emergencies, 3%, which is just under $1 million. We have almost a couple $100,000 that's restricted for our Channel 8 programming because those fees come from our PEG fees, and there's just over $2 million, which is leveraged or used as collateral against the loans made to Urban Renewal Authority on the 44th and Wadsworth project. So those funds are tied up. So the money you can play with is about $4.7 million. So expenditures, this hasn't really changed. Year to year, the stays about the same. Police is generally 33%. Public Works and Parks are usually tied. I think Parks is sticking their head out by a nose here and winning 15%. Public Works 14%. Admin Services 12%. Central Charges 11%. General Government 8%. And Community Development 4%. And Courts 3% of the budget. So now we'd like to break down the budget a little bit more, give you a little more detail on what's in the budget. We're not going to go through every line item. We would be here all night, but these are some of the more important items that you need to be aware of as a council. Some of the bigger items that show you that your budget is actually meeting some of your goals. So we'll go through them goal by goal. Your first goal is economically viable commercial centers. There's just some various items in here. We'll start out with Ridge at 38th. Expenses. We're proposing $80,000 in this year's budget for public events for the city, which are be held on 38th Avenue. Street improvements of $25,000. That's primarily striping of the street, and that's in the CIP budget. A corridor marketing and map directory is $7,000. General marketing materials and the website, which is now up and running, $35,000, which is a proposal from a request from Wheat Ridge 2020. Banners and lighting program, $25,000 to Wheat Ridge 2020, and then a district feasibility study to look at creating some type of business district along that corridor. That's a $20,000 request from Wheat Ridge 2020. We're also asking for about $10,000 to start looking at 44th Avenue and helping to market that corridor with some additional funds next year, in addition to what we did this year. And then some citywide public relations and marketing efforts. This is a project or an initiative we started this year. You may have noticed some of the emails we've been forwarding to you, and you may have noticed it yourself in some of the different newspapers. The city's been getting much more attention, which we've been helping to direct to get some good stories out about the city and the good things that are happening. We'd like to continue some of those efforts. We think it has a positive benefit for the community as a whole. Then citywide marketing and positioning tours. This is another Wheat Ridge 2020 request. This is to bring in, they do an annual realtor tour, I believe a developer tour, interested folks into the community that may want to invest. So that's some funds that they would like to help with that. Enhanced sales tax incentive program. The $103,000 is what we're projecting our payments will be for 2014 for those SDEP agreements that we approved this last year. We've had numerous ones. Chrissy, do you have a question? Okay. That will cover, let's see, there's 5 or 6. There's the King Supers, there's the West 29th Avenue restaurant, there's Colorado Plus, home cooking, and what else is in there? Yep. And as you remember, some of those SDEPs were multiple years, so that would be covering for the first year for those different programs.
Patrick,
Yep, Wheat Recyclery is done this year. Yes.
if I may ask, although we can look at it as a budget item, it's also covered by the sales tax that's generated, because these aren't full, not taking all sales. As I recall, some of them were half and half.
Yes, that's a good point. It's a revenue in, expense out, so we have to.
Revenue is actually appearing in the revenue side.
Yes.
And we're
Yep.
just looking at the expense out.
Yep.
Okay.
It's that portion you agreed to share back. Yep. Then we still have a portion of our Brownfields EPA grant. We're projecting to spend about $289,000 of that next year. I think we've spent $50,000 to $75,000 maybe this year. I think the total grant was, I always forget, Ken, $350,000 or $400,000?
$400,000.
$400,000. Majority of the work this year was done on the on Wadsworth, 44th or 38th and Wads, but the funds can be used throughout the city, primarily on Wadsworth, but we can use them primarily throughout the cities. So that's a revenue in, expense out also, Joyce. Live local events have been very popular, getting people out and about in the community. Wheatridge 2020 would like to expand on that program a little bit. They're requesting $40,000 for that. The Wheatridge Business District loan program, we typically have budgeted $40,000 a year. I think the last couple of years you have increased that, so we went ahead and were able to put $90,000 in next year's budget. Yes, ma'am.
That's really not a loan program, though.
No, that's a grant program. Yeah, that's a good catch. The next one's the loan program, the Building Up Business Loan Program. That's the Wheatridge 2020 program. They're only asking for $50,000 total for their bubble and their what's the other one called? Their home improvement loan program. So we split it between the two. They said that funds wouldn't necessarily be split. It's just based on the need and demand. Whoever, if it's residential or commercial, that needs loans. But they typically ask for about $150,000 a year in those loan programs, but they're starting to see some of that money come back. So it's actually turning into a revolving loan fund, so they don't need as much money to seed that. But they do have additional applications, I believe, in queue, and they believe they'll need that money next year. And then our annual payment to Wheatridge, Renewal Wheatridge, or the Urban Renewal Authority, we're projecting about $425,000. That's based on how much sales tax is generated at the Safeway centers. So that money helps pay off the loan for the 44th and Wads project and help with other urban renewal projects. So that's goal 1, economically viable commercial areas. There's much more in the budget that we could probably list under here, but these are some of the highlights. Goal 2, financially set. I'm sorry? Go ahead, yep. Plugging in.
Would that hit under the urban renewal fund if we were to go ahead and fund that? Is that what that is, this bracket?
Yeah, that would be definitely under, I believe, goal 1. The monies aren't listed here. It would have to be a supplemental out of the reserves. Correct. And we plan on actually bringing that back to council on the 23rd to talk about that cost. Goal 2, financially sound city providing exceptional service. we, as you remember, this year we brought forward to you the city's new compensation plan, a pay-per-performance plan. What we're hearing out there in the market is that most organizations are looking at about a 3% across the board increase. So we're proposing 3% across the board to put into a pay-performance plan. That doesn't mean every employee would get a 3%. They would have to be eligible for that and be rewarded that based on their performance. But 3% is the average, what we're hearing about out there in the community right now. We want to continue extending our priority-based budgeting. Again, this keeps us focused on our budget and keep looking at our budget through different lens. So we're proposing to add a few more features to the priority-based budgeting next year. Our paid time cash out program is $50,000. We normally get about just under $50,000 a year in requests to cash out PTO, which keeps our liability down a little bit on our total PTO liability. This year we originally had we're proposing about $425,000 in vehicle replacements, but at the last minute there was somebody actually wanted to take a request back, so we actually decreased this down to $377,500, and that's the total with the removal of one vehicle. Preventative street maintenance, we were able to propose about $1.2 million in preventative street maintenance for 2014. As I said, we were able to transfer 1.7, but a portion of that is going towards the current, let's see, what's the other program in there, Scott, for next year? The Kipling project. Kipling, that'll pay, the other part of the 1.7 will help pay the city's contribution to the Kipling pedestrian project. So we're only able to fund about $1.2 million, and that's primarily some asphalts. I think we split it up between asphalt, crack sealing, overlays.
Patrick,
Yes, sir.
do we have the Chase Street drainage in the 2013 budget, or would that be coming out of this budget?
That's in the 2013 budget. That was out to bid right now, so the funds are budgeted in this year's budget. We're continuing to expand on some of our regionalization efforts. We've had the Lakewood Crime Lab Services agreement with Lakewood for a couple years now. That's our annual expenditure for that. We recently brought to you the Regional Crime Lab, which the $23,000 will be for a partial year payment. Can't remember how many months that is. Do you know, Chief, if that's just for a partial year?
It's for a partial year. We figure that they'll start doing operations in May of 2014.
These are items that are helping us keep our internal costs down here. We don't have to have the staffing for them if we can share services with other jurisdictions. Public Works Parks and Maintenance Facility. This is just an expansion of our Public Works area. Joyce has some funds in her open space budget that's been dedicated to building a facility to store our park maintenance equipment to make sure that it lasts as long as it's possible. We are proposing to transfer, again, another $100,000 to our equipment replacement fund. This was a fund we set up several years ago to put money aside on an annual basis to make sure that we have a pot of money to help fund large equipment replacements. Things that we've replaced so far are police radios. We're looking at potentially some IT fiber projects to connect our different buildings through fiber, records management system, computer-aided dispatch system are all large expenditures that are coming up that it'd be nice to make sure that we have some money put aside to help us pay for those. And these are different areas that we're looking at regionalizing also. So hopefully the cost will be a lot lower than we expect. Yes, ma'am.
This $100,000, it's going into an equipment replacement fund, so it's set aside then.
Yes.
When we look at, is that fund then part of the amount that we have got in reserve, or is that held someplace else?
Nope, it's a separate fund.
Okay.
So it's moved out of the reserves and is dedicated to equipment replacement.
Okay, thank
I think we're projecting, if you looked in your budget, projecting to have about 400 and some thousand in it at the end of next year. Employee safety and wellness programs, we're proposing to spend a little bit on that also, just to hopefully keep our employees safe and healthy and productive. Swimming pool covers, Joyce has proposed to, which will help conserve some energy. We've had some audits done at our rec center and City Hall that look at efficiency, sustainability issues, and this was one recommendation, was to add covers to our pools to help save money. I think, Joyce, they said this, this is just our outdoor pool, which we don't drain on an annual basis. And I think they said this would be paid in how many years? 3 to 5 years, I believe. 5 years with the utility savings. If we keep the pools covered, we're reducing our utility payments. And then police department e-citation software we're looking at to help efficiencies in our police department. Police officers can actually write tickets in their cars and actually hand the offender a kind of a credit card receipt looking ticket, right? Is that how it works, Chief? Saves them time.
What it'll allow us to do is to swipe a driver's license and auto-populate data fields in a reader, and then the officer simply checks on the violation, hands it to the offender. There's a couple different ways that they can sign for that. It can be a fingerprint, it can be a signature, but the other cost savings is our records management specialists won't have to enter the data that they do from the hard form. Now it'll auto-populate into our records management system, so we feel we'll save in a variety of different efficiencies using technology.
Right. Thanks, Chief. So that's goal 2. Goal 3 is choice of desirable neighborhoods. If you remember, aging population needs assessment was a strategic item in your strategic plan last year. Nate worked on that, formed a committee. He's looking to implement some of the recommendations out of that plan. I think these funds would be used to do another assessment or a assessment of our community to look at what our needs are of our senior population. East Wheat Ridge Block Improvement Program. This is Wheat Ridge 2020 request. This is the program that Wheat Ridge 2020 works hand in hand with our police department and public works department, and looks at block by block in the East Wheat Ridge to help improve that part of our city through a number of different means. East Wheat Ridge Neighborhood Project. This is the police department's portion. They have a grant to fund police overtime to help with that project. And here's the second part of the Wheat Ridge 2020 loan program. This is the home investment loan program. They're requesting $25,000 for that. It's 50 total, and I just split it between the two. They said it wouldn't necessarily be split 50-50 between the two programs, but based on need. And then completion of our District 2 neighborhood park. We're looking at about $175,000 for that. That's out of both our Conservation Trust and Open Space funds. That's partially grant funded. We're looking at fairly significant expansion of our Greenbelt Trail, or access to it. This is that project, correct, Joyce? $450,000, which Joyce has identified, and you can speak to that if you like, yeah.
Basically, what this project does is move the trail on 41st Avenue off of the west side of Kipling and onto the open space property to the north of 41st Avenue. And it's based on leveraging a grant that is available at Jefferson County Open Space to help fund that project. Right, we need to do a feasibility study on exactly where it would go, but where it comes out on 41st now, as you travel north and you come out of the Recreation Center property, you would have to still cross 41st Avenue, but the concept is to build a trail along Kipling in front of the new Taste of Home cooking, is that correct?
Yes.
It's on the west side, so build a trail sidewalk in that right-of-way until it reaches the open space property, and then it would cross the open space property, and we'd have to install another bridge to the north side on our property, and then it would travel to the Moore Street trailhead. So that would remove it off of 41st Avenue for the most part, except across the street. We can't solve that issue right now. And then it would remain on open space property, no longer have to travel 41st Avenue down the dirt gravel road through the sanitation property, which we now have an access agreement to use.
Thanks, Joyce. And then along with that, Joyce is looking at updating our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It's getting a little dated, and then really incorporating and adding Greenbelt Trail Master Plan, which I think would be a new piece, correct? Or an update also. Really provide more of a master plan to increase access to the Greenbelt throughout the city. The police department has funds in next year's budget also for more community-oriented neighborhood programs and their Greenbelt patrol. And then also, this is a new expense for next year. We're proposing to add additional funds for seasonal help in the summer months in our CSO program to help with nuisance code when our weeds are the biggest and highest. And also park patrol. Those seasonals would be under the police department, but they would provide park patrol in some of our parks too. We've been getting an increase in complaints and concerns in some of our parks with maybe people not necessarily following the rules. So, goal 4, more attractive Wheat Ridge. We'll continue in our bus shelter now our bus bench maintenance cleaning program. We should have our bus benches in this fall. 36 more, I believe, or so. So that this contract is increasing a little bit. We do contract the maintenance and cleaning of those shelters and benches out. Have some additional funding in Parks budget for the annual plantings along 38th Avenue. Of course, the Kipling Street multi-use path and lighting program is a majority of that's going to be spent in 2014. And again, a majority of that's a grant. Various parks maintenance projects throughout the city, both coming out of our Conservation Trust and Open Space funds, about $255,000. A large item pickup program again in Public Works, $5,000. Next year, we are proposing a very slight increase in staffing, and that comes in the Parks Department to increase our parks maintenance staffing by 1 FTE. As you all know, Discovery Park came on in the last couple of years in phases, and we'll have a new park, Kendall Park, coming on, we hope, by next year also. And just those 2 parks alone, I think, is enough justification for this additional person. We're very lean the way it is today to keep up with the needs of those parks and to keep them attractive and well maintained. So we are requesting an increase in that. Joyce is proposing to eliminate a position at the recreation center. So that would be a 0 net increase actually for Joyce in that area. And then we're also looking at increasing this isn't an employee increase, it's just increasing funding to, when we bring on our seasonals in the summer in the main parks maintenance area, to provide funding to bring 1 or 2 of those in as lead positions. That would help free up our supervisors and managers who need to be supervising and managing, and these lead seasonal maintenance workers can take the crews out to the different parks and get the work done. So that would just be an increase in funding to help with our seasonal staffing. And then just other notable budget items don't necessarily relate directly to a strategic goal, but items you should be aware of. We did go ahead and put the Zopi Family Circus funding in again for the budget next year. We haven't got a complete report back from Gina on the circus on if they met their goal. We have them scheduled, I believe, have her scheduled to come in next Monday to give that report. So we believe they came very close to meeting their goal. Honestly, I can't remember what the IGA stated. I believe it was close to, they had to bring in about 60,000 in revenues, or the city couldn't contribute more than 32 or 33,000 to fund the program. So we'll make sure we have that IGA pulled, and Gina will come and present on what the revenues look like for this year. Outside agency request, we have our typical $10,000 budgeted. Feed the Future, this is a new expense. You guys funded that this year, a supplemental to fund that. So we went ahead and put it in the budget, but that's something you can discuss if you want to continue funding that on an annual basis. And I believe the chief forwarded a request letter from the backpack program for the funding. Biannual citizen survey, we do that every other year, and next year would be the time to do that again. If we want to do it again, that would be about $30,000 cost. Victim outreach services, the chief could probably address this, but we normally budgeted about $35,000 a year. They have a significant increase next year, up to $75,000, so I'll let the chief discuss that.
Victim outreach information provides our state mandated victim rights acts advocacy. They last year, they rely primarily on grant funding from the Crime Victim Services Board. They lost a significant amount of grant funding in this last grant cycle, so they're trying to make up for that, obviously, by charging the communities they provide services for. So we're not the only law enforcement community that's being asked to increase the amount of funding. And we get a lot of bang for our buck. We've not had any increases for a number of years from victims outreach information, but they have to fill that gap to provide the services that they have to provide. If we had to provide our own victim advocacy services, we'd probably be looking at a salary and benefits in the vicinity of $75,000, and we'd probably need a minimum of 2 advocates to provide the level of services they're providing to us today. So it's still a cost savings.
Thank you, Chief. And then our annual contribution for the Carnation Festival, we do have that included in your proposed budget. We give them $12,500 in cash, and then in-kind assistance of about $28,000. Majority of the $28,000 is overtime for police department, public works, and park staff to help out. And I think there's maybe some street barricades in there also, trash cans. ADA compliance improvements to the Greenbelt picnic shelters. We have about $10,000 budgeted for that. This is a mandate, and we're trying to phase some of this in and get caught up on our ADA compliance throughout our park system. Courtroom security improvements. This is something that the judge has been kind of asking for a few years here, and I think they have a pretty good proposal put together this year to really improve the security of the courtroom, get the metal detector out of the lobby area, provide some additional meeting space in the courtroom, and utilize some of the empty space for their prosecutors and attorneys to meet with their clients. Right now, we just don't have enough room, and security is definitely has been a concern for all of us, and I think this will really help with that. And then management contingency fund, I mentioned this earlier. As I mentioned, we were able to kind of look across all budgets and look at all those contingency accounts, and we were able to decrease the budget by about $70,000. But to do that, we budgeted $100,000 in my budget, which will be a contingency account. And if any of these items actually do come up throughout the year that we've identified and they actually need to spend the money, they can come to me, and we can transfer those funds to their department. If, I have a list of what we put in this fund, so it can't just be a free-for-all. It has to be something that was on that list that they budgeted. And typically, most of those funds don't get spent on an annual basis. But this just lets us free up about $70,000 and spend it on something we really need to spend it on. So with that, we'll move on to the CIP budget. Scott, do you want to take this, or? Sure.
Okay, moving into the CIP budget here. As the city manager mentioned previously, we've got a couple of fairly aggressive projects going on. A lot of the funds were encumbered here in 2013, like the Chase Street drainage project. The Kipling Trail, we've started, we're nearing completion of the design work on that, and we'll get going on construction on that. If I go into the pie charts here, beginning with the revenues, $4.1 million, you can see that about half of that is covered by grants. The other 40% or better general fund transfer, made up the rest with interest and lodger's tax. Expenditures, streets 69%. A good chunk of that is our annual pavement preventive maintenance fund, which is overlays, crack sealing, seal coats. That's decreased by a little bit this year in the budget, so some of the crack sealing, slurry coats, we'll probably be doing a little less of that next year. And then municipal capital projects, 1%. Going on again to the CIP Major Projects, the Kipling Street pedestrian improvements, $2.8 million, partially grant funded. The preventive street maintenance projects, $1.2 million. City Hall improvements, the courtroom security, $63,000, which was reflected in one of the earlier slides there. And then public improvement projects, Dowd Overlook, stormwater improvements. We have a couple private developments such as Dowd that do involve some completion of public infrastructure as part of the improvement. So that's our contribution to that.
Great, thanks, Scott. We move on to the Recreation Center Fund. I guess there's really no projects to talk about. Joyce, do you want to talk about it, or you want me to run through the numbers? I'll give you Open Space and Conservation Trust when it comes. Recreation Center funds, we're projecting revenues of just over $2 million and expenditures of about $2.3 million. As you can see, the expenditures are outpacing our revenues on an annual basis. So our ending fund balance for next year is getting somewhat low, and a little concerning for both Joyce and I. We're projecting an ending fund balance next year of about $873,000. Joyce's goal was to keep that over $1 million. So we took a close look at fees this year. We're pretty close on with all of our competition. And we're really looking at our expenditures to see where we can cut back and without increasing fees too much. So I think this is going to have to be a big discussion maybe next year, or just an awareness that the Recreation Center may not be able to continue funding itself as it does today, but which is fairly typical for most municipal centers. We're fairly fortunate here in Wheat Ridge that when we increased the sales tax temporarily by half a penny to fund the construction of the rec center, there was additional funds that were put aside in a fund balance to help continue funding the rec center. But that's not going to last forever. And when interest was good, interest rates were good, we were getting anywhere between $80,000 and $100,000 a year in interest off of those funds that Joyce was able to use for preventative maintenance projects and replacing equipment. But now we're getting, how much are we getting a year now? 20, if that? 4,000? Oh, we're getting about 4,000 now a year. So just that alone has had a big hit on our fund balance. So it's just something we'll be looking at this a lot closer here. Joyce and I will in the next year, and probably having discussions with you all. Open space funds. Joyce, you want to take that one?
So total revenues are projected at $1,203,750, with expenditures at $1,567,381. The major projects we're looking at next year, of course, is we consistently fund that $480,000 for the 5, I believe, positions that we have charged off to the open space fund to maintain the parks. So that number goes up. It's gone up in the last 3 years about $30,000 to absorb the increased cost and benefits and salaries of those 5 positions. As I mentioned earlier, the trail replacement repair project, it's a strategic time to try to do that project. It's part of as I said, moving the trail off the street. So with Clear Creek Trail being a regional trail, this would have a great impact and great support regionally in terms of grant funding. So I'd like to see if I can leverage that with that project. The Public Works Parks Operation Facility, that is a part of our Public Works Master Plan, which the goal is to move the entire parks operation to the Public Works site. We bought an acre and a quarter several years ago with open space funds so that we had a place to build this storage building. So we're in the process of doing that. It will help us get our equipment indoors, which will increase our efficiency as well as the lifespan of the equipment and the mowers that have to sit out all winter right now. It also will get us a chemical storage room that meets regulations so that our chemicals aren't stored in our workspace
And there's an
as they
extra,
currently are.
sorry, Joyce, there's an extra 0 there on your PowerPoint. It's just 250,000, not 2.5 million.
We are combining it with this year's funding of 150, so the total cost of the project will be 400,000. Kendall Park Development, the design, this additional $125,000 is to fund the public art project, which did not fit into the budget as previously planned. It also includes some ADA upgrades to the playground and some of the design elements that do not fit into the budget. And that includes things like little butterfly table, some different options like that to make the park fun. Prospect Park design improvements, that's a design fee only, and we're looking at a project in 2015 to rehab the 2 baseball fields down there, as well as possibly make some other improvements to the park. We own a storage yard to the east of the fields that is in the floodplain and that needs to not be used for storage, so that would also make better use of that land in terms of creating another soccer field. So we have more rotation and less wear and tear on our every field every season. We still have the Kipling Pedestrian Improvements Grant Match in open space at $70,000. There's some money set aside for the Randall Park acquisition improvements. If that acquisition were to come forward and be approved by council, we would need some money to resod and demo the house that's located on the corner of 41st and Gray. And then the master plan updates, that includes our Parks and Recreation master plan, as well as a very dated trail master plan that the city completed in 1999. And then we keep a placeholder for open space improvements, and that's for minor repairs and maintenance that may come up unexpectedly in the Greenbelt. An example this year was the Lewis Meadows Trail. The Crusher Fine Trail washed away a couple months ago, and it washed away again. So we were a little disappointed. Should have not been so quick to get that one fixed, I guess. The Conservation Trust Fund, which are our lottery dollars, revenues consist. Yes.
So the park acquisition improvements, that's, okay, so that's for the purchase of that property, but what is the total expense of that?
Now that it would just be, this year we have $200,000 in the 2013 budget for acquisition. If that acquisition does not occur in 2013, it'll need to be reappropriated in the 2014 budget. So the $50,000 is just to do something with the acquired house, which would be to demolish it and resod and fix the irrigation on the corner where the house exists today.
But that effort or that approval of buying that property has not been done, correct?
Correct. The owner has not come forward, and at this point, he needs. I think Patrick did a staff update. He's not prepared to sell it. He missed. He had a window of opportunity to put it on the market, and that passed. So those are just placeholders in case council chooses to move forward with that project when it does come forward.
And so that is still something that would come forward to council, right?
Absolutely. It is.
But let me ask you this, that $200K could be spent somewhere else.
It could.
Spend it there.
That's correct.
Joyce, did we have anything in here specifically for bicycles, any bicycle paths or any?
Well, the moving the Clear Creek Trail off of 41st Avenue is definitely a bicycle path
Thank you.
as the grant match for the Kipling pedestrian trail. So the Conservation Trust Fund projects, we continue to have a placeholder for the Anderson Building replacement of $200,000, and that is, the intent is for that to accrue over a period of years until there's enough there to replace the Anderson Building. Based on the Recreation Center maintenance costs, and again, as Patrick explained, the intent on the Recreation Center Fund, when it was placed in a fund and passed by the voters, was that the interest on the fund balance would subsidize the costs of the recreation center that could not be paid for through fees and charges. So it was never, the intent was never that the fees and charges would completely support the costs of operating the rec center. The thought at the time was that there would be enough interest on the $2 million that it would subsidize. And of course, as we explained, that isn't happening. So what I've been doing over the last several years is taking the CIP projects of the Recreation Center out of the Conservation Trust Fund. This seems to be a reasonable thing to do. The Conservation Trust Fund has to be spent on recreation projects. We are now built out with our last park at 44th and Kendall, and this fund should be able to handle more of the capital improvement projects needed at the recreation center, because the fund itself is not going to be able to absorb those. When you have to resurface a pool at $80,000, that really cuts into the fund balance quickly, or a roof or an HVAC. So the recreation center is now 14 years old, and we're going to see more of those kinds of improvements needed. So that's what the $101,000 includes, as well as new equipment, new treadmills. Prospect Park Expansion Playground, that's our small playground that's in the area west of Prospect Lake. There's a little crusher-fine trail path around it that needs to be replaced. The park site development at Kendall Park, that's again additional money to finish, to meet the budget for the design, and also includes a crosswalk on 44th Avenue to get people across from the south to the north. And then park maintenance projects of $40,000, again, is ADA surfacing for playgrounds. There are a lot of new ADA regulations, and we're working to meet the recommendations of our ADA assessment. And then annual resurfacing of tennis and basketball courts is needed.
Thank you, Joyce. We won't go through all the special revenue funds. There are 5 others: public art, police investigation, municipal court, capital equipment replacement, and crime prevention, code enforcement funds. Those are all on pages 171 and 183 of your budget book. If you have questions later about those, we can definitely address those. 2014 staffing changes. I initially addressed a part of this earlier. As I mentioned, Joyce is proposing to eliminate a pool manager position at the Recreation Center. I think just because of, as Joyce mentioned, the center is now 14, 15 years old, and we're doing things better and more efficient, and we're able to, through attrition, eliminate this position. We decided it's not needed anymore, so it's always good to look at those positions as they come up available for review. New additions that we're proposing, the last one I already mentioned, the Parks Maintenance Worker 2, I'll go up from the bottom. And then the one in the middle, it's a 0.25 increase. This is just increasing our payroll technician who's currently on staff at a 0.75 FTE. She's working close to full-time as the way it is today, correct, Heather? And she's being paid out of additional funds elsewhere to pay for her additional time. But just with all the new payroll laws and liability issues, there's a lot more work that goes into payroll. And also, this position, the last couple of years, took on the billing piece of our administrative hearing process, which fortunately, most people are paying their bills instead of fighting them and going through an abatement process with the police department. But everybody that receives a code enforcement fine, they come in and pay, and that gets paid through our payroll technician. She has access to our cash drawer and takes care of those. So it's really a full-time position at this time, so we're requesting just to increase that to full-time. The last position that we're looking at, this would be a temporary contract position. This would be, but initially start out as a full-time equivalent employee. It'd be a combination inspector position. We have, maybe I'll let Ken address this, but we have numerous projects, fortunately, and this is all good news, coming on in the city this next year that are going to require much more work out of our building and inspection department, and I'll let Ken address the justification for this.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, we have, in a typical year, as you all know, as members of the community, we don't do a lot of single-family new construction, and that is changing in a positive way for us next year. We got entitlements for, or are getting entitlements for one of the cases for 3 projects, Dowd Overlook, single-family development of 54 homes, the Urban Green, which is 26 homes just off 38th at 39th and Fenton, and then the Newtown Builders project that's moving forward at the former Perrins Row project, and that's the one that's not fully entitled. But just assuming that the majority of those permits come in over the course of this year and next year, in the case of Dowd Overlook, some of those permits we anticipate would trickle into 2015 as well. But that is a significant permit volume and associated inspection volume. We estimated, again, based on not all of those permits getting issued in 2014, that we would pay about $83,000 in contract inspections. We do currently use a contract inspection contract to do about $20,000 worth of inspections a year, so that's kind of the delta. We looked at what it would cost to in-house those, and we estimate that a benefited staff position is about $70,000 for a combination inspector, so that we can in-house those inspections. In our mind, and again, as Patrick mentioned, we want to be conservative and not assume that that's a trend. Those projects will be completed, so we're budgeting that as a one-year contract inspector position. 2 other advantages to that in our minds. One, from a consistency standpoint in terms of the inspections that are conducted, it's good to have the same person doing the inspection at framing as it is at plumbing and on through the project. So there's that consistency and quality control we think is important. And second, there's plan review associated with all of those projects, and currently our plan review combination inspector spends about 2/3 of his time in the office doing plan review and another third out doing inspections. So this will allow him to be in the office doing the plan reviews on those associated building permits. That's important from a revenue perspective because it'd actually be a net loss if we had to farm out the plan review. Most plan review agencies that would do plan review for us, and they do exist in the private sector, would charge the full fee that we charge plus an additional surcharge. So we'd actually lose money on the plan review side of things. So that's why we're proposing that for this year. In terms of the building permit volume, we're not assuming any of the commercial projects that Patrick has spoken of will necessarily be constructed, so that would be an additional reason should those projects move forward in 2014.
Thanks, Ken. So an overall net increase with the elimination and the increase in positions, overall net increase of 1.25 FTEs. The next.
Patrick, one
yes,
question
sorry,
for you. Does the revenue projection include additional fees that we would get from building permits and use taxes?
Yeah, those are all factored in, pretty conservatively factored in on what we expect to come in, but there are several large projects that, it's just unknown at this time when they'll happen, when and if they'll happen, so we're hoping the revenues are going to be a lot higher. A lot of the large commercial projects that are in the works today weren't factored in that revenue. And I know the Lutheran Hospital has a potential expansion too, which we didn't factor in also because it's not 100% finalized yet, so pretty conservative, though. Your next graph chart is just breaks down the staffing by department and by year since 2011. Staying fairly static in our employee count. As I mentioned, we're only proposing a 1.25 increase next year. Majority of those are in the general fund. We got 12.5 in the recreation center fund. 4.5 are funded out of our crime prevention fund, which is primarily funded with our lodgers tax, and 5 employees are funded out of the open space, which is funded by the open space tax. And then staffing broken down by department. Our police department is our largest department in the city, 106 employees. Parks and Rec is next, which that does include our recreation center of just over 46 employees, 20 in admin services, 29 public works, just a little over 10 in court, and 4 in general government. So now we'll move on to compensation and benefits, and I will turn it over to Heather.
Thanks, Patrick. So 2014 is going to be year 2 of our new compensation plan, and as Patrick mentioned earlier, we're budgeting $450,000 in the 14 budget, which equates to about 3%, in keeping with what we're seeing out there among other jurisdictions in the market overall. Next year, we'll conduct a market study, and any changes that result from that study will be incorporated in the 2015 proposed budget. In terms of insurance benefits, the city offers medical, dental, short-term and long-term disability, life and accidental death and dismemberment, as well as a wellness program. When we conduct our annual benefits review, we work with our healthcare broker, IMA, and we look at the following 5 areas: program design, plan design, the city's contribution levels in comparison to the market, industry best practices, as well as participant satisfaction. I won't go through all of these ancillary benefits, but you'll note, as noted earlier, life and accidental death and dismemberment, etc. We also offer a Section 125 plan through 24-hour flex, and we're in our 3rd year of a 3-year contract guarantee with them. For dental, we have no change in our dental coverage. We work with Delta Dental currently, no plan design changes as well. In terms of medical, we currently use Kaiser, and they submitted a proposal with an initial 12.1% rate increase. We negotiated that renewal down to about 9.8%. So you'll hear me say 10%, which is just an approximate number. Included in this 10% renewal is about a 2% increase just as a result of healthcare reform implementation. There's fees associated that Kaiser incorporates in their renewals, and so there's about 2% there. There is one plan design change that's proposed from Kaiser to our DHMO plan, and that's resulting in an increase in the out-of-pocket limits if participants decide to go with a DHMO plan. But overall, no significant plan design changes for 2014. The city's planning on continuing the equity ranges that were established in 2011, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So we're proposing to keep with the 3 Kaiser plan options: the HMO, which is a traditional healthcare plan, the DHMO, and then the high deductible health plan known as HDHP, which the city implemented last year. So 14 will be our 2nd year of that option. For the HMO, we're keeping with the employee-only contribution of 90%, employee plus one 85%, and then family contribution at 75%. There's no deductible with the HMO plan. For the DHMO, you'll see the contribution levels at 95, employee plus one at 90, family at 80. And then this is where you start to see a deductible added to the plan. The $500 deductibles for employee only, and then employee plus one and family, you have a $1,000 deductible. The high deductible health plan, HDHP, we're proposing to keep with a 95% contribution level, employee plus one at 90%, and then a family contribution of 85%. And the deductible levels are a little bit higher. They're $1,500 and then $3,000. No.
Question, are we offering employees that dollar amount to, you know how last year we gave a certain amount to employees if they did the high deductible plan? Are we doing that again this year?
We are looking at our options in that respect in terms of, we call that seed money. And we did seed employee only at $700, and then employee plus one or family at $1,000. And so we haven't made a final decision on that seeding element, but that's something that we're looking at for this year.
Go ahead, you want to finish that one? Yeah, it will affect, well, it depends on, the more people that move into the high deductible health plan, the more money the city saves. So, there could be a break-even point, but it all depends. That's why we haven't made a decision yet, because we need to figure out how many employees we think we can get to move to the high deductible plan, and what other companies that have a high deductible plan are doing with seed money. Some provide seed money annually every year of the plan. Our initial intention was just to do it the first year to get people to switch over, which would save the city money. We got 28, which was quite a few more than we expected to jump the first year. So we're really trying to figure out if we seed it again another year, can we get another 10 or so, which again is going to save quite a bit of money because the premiums on the high deductible plan are much lower than they are on the HMO plan. And that's the intent of our proposed contribution levels too. You see, we pay more in the premium amount for the employee. And our high deductible, it's 90%. High deductible, it's 95%. HMO, it's 90%. And then family, 75 and 85. And that's to encourage folks to, again, look at their out-of-pocket expense to see if it might be better for their family or their individual to move to a high deductible plan. And we're actually looking at these contribution rates too, and we're just working on a survey of what other communities are providing, because we'd still like to make sure we're remaining somewhat competitive with our competition, because people look at not just salaries but also benefits. But the overall goal is to keep these costs down and to hopefully decrease them. And to do that, I think we need to get as many as we can into a high deductible plan.
Okay, and one other question, sorry to interrupt, but the equity ranges, that's for full-time? What is it for part-time?
It's prorated based on the part-time hours. So, 20-hour employee, 30-hour-a-week employee. It's just essentially prorated. Does that make sense, or?
The contribution equity ranges are the same. We still have employee plus one, and family for part-time. Yeah.
So it's not different for a part-time person?
The premium amount is, yeah. Is that what you're asking, the out-of-pocket premium?
For the percentage. So if I'm so let's pretend I'm a full-time employee here and I do Kaiser, and let's pretend it's $100. Let's just pretend, let's do easy math. And you guys are going to pay 90%, so I only pay $10. Okay, so if I'm a part-time person and it's $100, what do you pay?
Yeah, it's again prorated. So if somebody at 40 hours is paying.
If I'm a city council person.
Yep.
What do I pay?
You pay at a 20-hour employee level. We can't go lower than that.
So.
Sorry, I don't pay it part-time. I did it. Yeah, it's 50. It's prorated based on the number of hours. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head,
okay.
but that's essentially
Usually,
the method that we use. And so, Christy, you had asked earlier about the the overall percentage increase, and so the contribution levels are being recommended as being kept the same, but the premium increase will be shared with the employee.
Right.
Okay. So Again, as Patrick noted, with the high deductible health care plan, this comes in combination with a health savings account. And our goal is to try to encourage as much participation among employees to move into the HDHP because the premium amount cost to the city is lower. And so this plan design is staying the same in terms of the deductible levels at $1,500 and then $3,000, prescriptions at $20 and $40, maximum out-of-pocket amounts at $3,000 and $6,000 for family. And this is something that's not a use it or lose it, like a Section 125 plan. This can be carried over from year to year. So we've been very proactive within HR in terms of hosting informational meetings, and we'll continue to do that as we kick off open enrollment here in another month to do our best to encourage employees to look at their options when choosing their health insurance for 2014. In terms of wellness, last year we rolled out, well, for this year, for 13, we rolled out a new wellness strategy for the city in keeping with enhancement of our current wellness program, and then a move towards a health status rewards program, as well as investing in health management for employees. We laid out a 3-year strategy. In year 1, which is this year, 2013, was a focus on increasing participation. For year 2, which will be 2014, we're going to continue that focus on increased participation as well as overall health improvement, but in particular, really looking at what we can do to shift enrollment towards that high deductible health plan. Year 3, the focus will be health outcomes and overall return on investment for the city. For year 1, we did achieve increased participation. We exceeded our goal and got about 70% participation, which is an increase from 32% participation in 2012. So we're very proud of that. Our challenge with participation is getting increased participation on our quarterly incentives that we're offering as part of this participation right now is about 15%, which is really low. So we're going to be looking at some plan design changes with wellness to see if we can't get employees more engaged on a quarterly basis. So that 70% figure reflects employees who sign up for the wellness program and participate in that annual health screening and wellness checkup. Year 2, we're going to look at increased participation. So for 2014, we're going to raise that benchmark from 70 to 80%. And then we're going to strive for 60% participation in the quarterly incentives. So that's ambitious, but we believe that we can achieve that. And then year 3, again, is the health outcomes, city's return on investment focus. In terms of the city's insurance coverage, workers' compensation, we saw a 3.8% increase in workers' comp. The total premium is $399. We're receiving about a $12,000 loss control audit credit. For property casualty, we're seeing an 11.6% increase. That premium is about $207, and then we're receiving a $2,400 loss control credit, and then we are receiving a property casualty member equity credit from Source of about $4,400. Should I keep going?
Wrapping up here, we did have several opportunities for public input on the budget, and if you remember from the public meetings, this is just a summary of those who did come to speak, and I think most of those did speak to bicycle pedestrian type issues, 38th Avenue, Weir's 2020 programs, bike lanes were a majority of the public comments. So budget summary. We're presenting to you a proposed general fund budget which is balanced without using our reserves. We've identified over $8 million that are directly linked to your council goals. However, we're still continuing to defer maintenance and large equipment replacement. We are getting our reserves down to your minimum level per your policy of 17%. But we by doing that, we were able to still transfer $100,000 to our large equipment replacement fund and 1.7 to our CIP budget. Upcoming action on the budget, we have October 14th scheduled as the required public hearing on the budget, and then October 28th as the adoption of the budget and certification of the property tax mill levy. So we are looking for city council direction tonight or at the future public hearing meetings, a consensus on the proposed budget, outside agency contribution program recommendations, which you should have received a separate memo on that. We had a decrease in actual requests, I believe, this last year, but we still had more requests than available funding. So we would like your consensus on our recommendations there. We've had a few requests for additional funding items that we did not include in the budget, and those are listed on the last page of your slide here packet. Jefferson County School District for the last several years has been asking for additional funding, not just from municipalities, but from all kinds of sources to help fund their outdoor lab program for their children, based on Wheat Ridge's student population and low to mod income and those children on free and reduced lunch. The amount to cover funding for our students would be about $24,500 for next year. Jeffco Economic Development Council presented to you a few months ago, asked for an additional $3,400 a year for 5 years, added to our current $6,600 contribution, which is in the budget. The $6,600, we didn't include the $3,400. Jeffco Action Center is actually on your upcoming agenda. I think they would like to come meet with you at a study session and speak about their capital campaign to increase their services and their facilities. They've asked for a $30,000 contribution to that capital campaign. And the Senior Resource Center asked on an annual basis for funds for their circulator bus program. We don't normally budget that, but we'd like consensus if that's something you just want to budget on an annual basis. And it's normally $30,000. This last year they did ask for a $12,000 increase, so $42,000 would be the total if you'd like to go that high. So those are additional items that are not in the proposed budget. So with that, we will the directors here, if you'd like to if you have any specific questions about specific departments.
I have a couple about the health and wellness or the insurance. Under the medical, Kaiser says that part of the 9.8% is attributed to exposure. Is that, what kind of exposure are we looking?
It's exposures of use in inpatient care.
They're expecting us to use more.
No, that's current. That's our actual
we are using. Okay.
Yeah.
And then under the property casualty, an 11.6% increase. Was that because of our usage of it, or?
Yeah, there is. They look at several different things, and they look at a 3-year period. They look at your current year plus the previous 3 years.
So that microburst.
The microburst. No, that was 2009.
Oh, that was more than that. Okay.
But we've had some incidents that a couple vehicles issues and that because of our exposure. Generally, we do a fairly good job. I think right now our liability or our payment out this year is only $5,000, I believe, in property casualty claims. So we're doing pretty well now, but unfortunately they look back 3 years on your history. So a good portion of it was that. And was there something else? Was it exposure? Oh, there was a state law change too this year down in the legislature to change the cap for liability claim, or is it liability claims? So they increased those caps have not been increased. What the maximum payout would be. Yeah, municipal immunity. So part of that was the reason they went up to.
It was a substantial raise. Just want to.
Yeah, and that's high. We haven't had one that high in quite some time.
Questions or comments? Ms. Davis?
Okay, hold on. I'm going to be like last year. Sorry. Okay, so one thing that I want to ask about is in the master, the bike ped plan, one of the things that I think seems as if, and I might be wrong, is maybe a quick fix, but a not expensive one, is the, like the Sharrows on Pierce, because that is considered the bike plan, but there's really no signage or no little Sharrows or lanes on Pierce that really assist the biker to let the driver know, hey, we share the road here. This is my plan. And I'm wondering, is there anything in the budget to do that? Because I really think that's something we need to do.
Certainly give it to you, Scott, but I'll take a start at it. In the Bike Ped Master Plan, we did a phase 3 on the Bike Ped Master Plan, kind of a joint effort between Public Works and Community Development. And Pierce, among two other corridors, or 32nd and Pierce, were kind of the two highest priorities, where we looked at kind of a low, medium, and high project of what we could actually do. And that I think it was the medium project on Pierce was probably the most affordable project on the list, because by and large we have the right-of-way, to some extent we have the pavement, and it would be fairly easy to stripe a bike lane. And that is a high priority bike route on the Bike Master Plan. Actually connects to a trailhead on the Clear Creek Trail, as well as going south connects to a bike route in Lakewood as well, and as well as Edgewater. So that is, I think, a great project, and one that could be implemented. We looked at these numbers recently. I think it was in the $140,000 range, and that included the striping, the signage, and the additional asphalt in a few locations. We actually looked at a grant through Kaiser Permanente that unfortunately only had a cap of $20,000 on $200,000 grants that we thought, but that 20% cap was on capital construction, so the grant wasn't a good fit for it, but it's definitely on our radar, particularly with the comments that we received at the budget public hearing, or the opportunities for public input. So I think it's a great suggestion. In terms of Sharrows specifically, I think we've got that on a future study session. For those of you who may not be familiar with Sharrows, the concept of Sharrows is that on a designated bike route, where you don't have room for a full striping of a bike lane, that in the travel lane you make a very substantial pavement marking that indicates that this is a shared lane. Denver has certainly utilized those fairly extensively. I don't know if Scott has thoughts on those, but I know we are due to talk to you about that. There's more paint there, so I don't know what the cost would look like.
Yeah, I can just add a little more to that. As Ken mentioned, the phase 3 of the bike and ped plan was just completed. So one of the things we're looking at or trying to do right now is put together a 10-year plan in the CIP, looking out 10 years, and in that, kind of looking at different opportunities, places we can leverage and try and do some of these bike and ped improvements that have been identified. It might be major capital projects. It might be some of our more preventive maintenance projects where we're paving, redevelopment projects. If there's other things going on where we can also take care of some of these bike and ped needs, especially if there's something less costly than, say, constructing a whole new trail, pavement markings. If there's opportunities to do these things, we're going to try and look at the 10-year plan a little closer and see maybe where we could get some of these things in.
So I don't know what the process is for making a request to revise the budget. Do we do it? I mean, I do think something needs to be done. So I don't know if if it's my place to say, go back and look and see if we can do something, or do we need a council consensus, or, yeah, I'd like to make a consensus that something in this year's budget, and I can't believe I'm actually saying spend money, but there's some places I'm looking to save some money too, that I'd like to make a consensus that that staff go back and put into that plan some type of effort to do some type of the bike plan on Pierce, and get that going this year or next year, rather than redrafting a 10-year plan that we've already, what year are we into this already billion-dollar plan? But it would be a quick win for a lot of people in our community that they've been requesting for a while.
Richard, do you want to give the street range, like 26th?
Yeah, help me out on this, everyone. So I would say Pierce, 26 to 40, yeah, to the trailhead.
No, it's 26 to 48, basically.
Yeah, 26 to 48, basically.
All in favor or discussion on that consensus? All in favor? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
But we're still going to get it at a study session to hear about actual, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the only spending I'm going to do. So then I have a couple other questions. Do you want us to take it all at once, or do you want us to ping pong back and forth? Okay. So I think the other, okay, so we got my master plan. I got all my sticky notes too, and I can bother you guys about that later. My other discussion is more in compensation, and there's some other areas too, but I'm figuring somebody else will talk about that. On the compensation, I would like to see if it's. Let me ask a couple questions. So the PLT or PTO buyout is about $50,000. So in my mind, what that's meaning to me is that folks aren't taking their vacation time, and instead of me possibly having a $60,000 salary, I don't take my vacation, or I don't take as much of my vacation, and then I cash out. So actually my $60,000 budgeted salary all of a sudden turns into a let's say $63,000, because I just cashed out. So just a couple questions. So the PTO, is there a bank, like do we have a limit, like use it, like if you get the 350, you don't accumulate?
We do. You max out at 300.
Okay.
And you're required to take 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks a year, before you can use a cash out, take a cash out. And the cash out is one for, or 1.5 for 1.
And when I take a cash out, am I not allowed to eliminate my bank? So I can't draw my bank down to 0. I can only draw it to, say, I have to have at least 80 hours?
Yes.
Okay. So one of my other recommendations would be that we have our employees take their time off, and we say that this is the last year for a buyout program. And I know this is like, people are going to look at me like I'm crazy, but I think if you look at a lot of industries, and I know people might say, well, we're not a lot of industries, we're, municipal and we're different, but I think I think that we need to be mindful of our dollars, and the point of time off is for people to use it and for respite and to actually take the time, rather than to increase my salary at the end of the year. So I would like to at least give our employees a kind of a 1 year, this is the last year for buyout, and we encourage you to use it. That's a savings of $50,000 in the end. And again, it also takes hopefully some PTO, PLT off the books. So, okay, so I'm gonna so these are two kind of controversial types of things. Or maybe discussion of what people think of that. I mean, I think if you go to a lot of industries, they're eliminating a lot of that PTO type of buyout program, because what it does is it increases my salary as an employee and doesn't encourage me to take respite and take my time. So.
Could I speak to that?
Yeah, sure.
First, yeah. I agree with a lot of what you said, and we do really encourage employees to take their time, and I think we were struggling with that when I first started here, and I think we've increased that. What I would say is, even if you get rid of the cash out program, you're still going to have people maxing out. We just don't. We're very, very lean in many areas of the city where employees can't take 4 to 5, 6 weeks a year of vacation, which you would have to do to keep that 300 balance down. A policy could be is you max out, period, and you just sit
Yeah, I
there.
mean, that's the whole point.
And you're right, and I think certain companies do that.
Use it or lose it.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear it all the time.
But we do struggle in certain areas of the city to be able to get people out of here on a frequent basis.
Can I speak to that as a user just a little bit? And I actually think that some program, I'm supporting Christie's idea, but I would just an observation on what that looks like if you use municipal services. I've had this experience in both Westminster and Commerce City lately, where I had to go and I was trying to get my projects moved forward, and I was told that the staff would be unavailable because they were having to use up their time, and in one case it was for like 3 weeks on a required employee. So I understand the pressure Patrick's on, but I would like to see us draw down the deferred liability as quickly and completely as we can. Does a 1 year, I mean, my feeling is if you've exceeded the cap, you just stop accruing is a reasonable program if it's been in place for long enough. And I don't know, I'd be interested in other, I'd like to see us draw the liability down in a reasonable time frame. I don't know what that is, and I don't know if everybody else supports that idea.
And just to add to that, sorry, I think it'd be interesting to see statistically how many employees are at 300 hours, and, just to see who would be impacted by this, and to see if this is a reasonable request of us to do, or is it, and I think then that's another thing to consider, because again, I guess if you look at 50,000 in PTO buyback, that's could be an employee somewhere, that an extra FTE. But what people are doing, they're kind of nickel, I'm going to take an extra it changes people's salaries so that you're not buying an extra does that make sense? An extra FTE. So maybe even if at the next study session, or even, that we can kind of learn where people are balance-wise to see if this is going to significantly impact the employees. Because I don't want to take things away, but I do think that, sometimes there's things that we can do that has a benefit all around.
Tracy?
I guess I have another question. I mean, how many employees do we have that are actually at 5 vacation weeks a year? Because I know. But I mean, to me, that's maybe a part of it is a policy change too, to say that maybe we don't want to be giving 5 weeks a year as frequently as maybe we are now, because then fewer vacation, we got to keep a balance, but more vacation weeks a year, more PTO that's not getting used.
5 weeks vacation is a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of vacation. I didn't realize. I thought people were maxed at 3.
Including sick time? Like how, it'd just be curious how much.
Yeah, the 300's everything.
A 0 to 5 year employee, their accrual is, a 5 to 10 year employee, their accrual, 10 to 15.
Yeah, there is a, you have it right here? Oh, you expect me to read that? Woo.
You want some glasses here? I got some reading glasses, Patrick.
If you're here 16 years or more, you max out at 300. If you're here between 11 and 15, you max out at 270. Between 6 and 10, 240 hours. Between 0 and 5, 210 hours.
You mean you max out, lose it, or use it or lose it? What about accrual?
Accrual, is all different too. Accrual, 40-hour status, biweekly. Is that annual? Annual accrual. So 0 to 5 employee gets 20 days. Is that right? 6.5 hours biweekly. 6.15 biweekly. And then it goes up. Those different categories goes up to 7.8 per paycheck, 8 per paycheck, and then 8.92 per
So
paycheck.
does that include holiday time?
No, holiday's separate. That's PTO. That is your sick and vacation, and bereavement, funeral leave, any type of leave besides holiday is in there.
And that's all translatable into cash at some point?
If you, not all of it, no. And when you leave, it's if you leave employment with the city, it's paid out. There's a cash out program where if you have to have a minimum amount in your bank, and then you have to have taken at least 2 weeks of vacation that year, and you can cash out up to 2 weeks at a 1.5 to 1 ratio, is the annual cash out. And we've only been we budget 50,000 is the max we've been budgeting for that.
Okay, so one other thing, I guess, I don't know,
I still-
maybe we could have a
are we asking-
consensus to bring back some numbers?
Bringing back a program, go ahead, George.
Well, I suppose bringing it back and talking about it is fine. You know, it doesn't seem excessive to me necessarily when you consider PTO being a combination of vacation and everything else. It seems in line, at least what I expect to see. I do understand the idea of trying to, I suppose, manage an annual cash out program, but you know, in fact, what you have is a liability issue on the books, and so that has to be looked at, and that's, you know, in association with this. So what you save by not creating a buyout program on an annual basis, at some point on a year-over-year basis creates a liability that I don't know how to quantify that, but I suppose that's part of what should come back to us, because that's part of the metrics of this. If you don't consider the growing liability, then I don't think we're really understanding it. You know, and it may be problematic for us. I will say, and this, I'm sorry, I tag on just a general comment for the budget on this, is that, you know, and I see this in my industry. You know, the fact that people are having a hard time taking their vacations is indicative of the fact that people that we're not staffed properly. Okay, that's just flat out the way it is for me. Mm-hmm. I've got more than half of my employees who are maxed out, and you know why? Because I work them too hard, and they work too hard. And they work too long. And at the end of the day, every year we struggle with talking about how to not only take care of our people, but actually to accomplish the things we're supposed to be accomplishing on a daily and yearly basis. So, you know, I mean, just to take just a string that's inside of this is that this discussion is a window into a larger problem that's inside of this budget. Yeah. You know, and it's inside of the budget message. If you look at some of the things we're talking about, you know, we were 5 or 6 FTE, you know, higher than we're at right now in 2004. That's, you know, that's a problem in my mind. So I get it. I'm willing to look at it, but, you know, I want to be transparent that if we're looking at it, I'm going to ask some questions about the balance as it relates to our liability, but also the balance of what it really means about are we staffed properly? So.
Yeah, no, I think work-life balance is important as that in consideration of that. Okay, so the other thing, so I'm just trying to think of ways that we could nip and tuck a little bit and not affect a lot.
Can I try and close the loop? Is there a consensus then to have staff bring back an analysis of the program?
Yeah, kind of an idea of how, you know, the PTO balances and.
Do you want that before adoption of the budget, or is that something that we can schedule as soon as possible? Do you want that information before you consider the adoption of this budget? Is my question, I guess.
I would say no, because I still think that if it was something that we were going to implement, we'd still have to give people a year. Okay. It's not something you could just pull out from. You can just stop and say, okay, nobody can.
So is there a consensus to move this issue outside the 2014 budget process, but ask staff to bring us back and study on the issue? Does anybody object to that? Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, one last thing, because I know other people are going to touch other things that I would probably talk about too. The other thing is the breakdowns of the equity ranges for insurance. And if I had it my way, I'd just do a flat %, regardless if you're employee plus one, or family. I think I'm curious, but I did kind of look around after last year's budget or after the benefit discussion, and I have found that mostly it's a flat type of rate. It's not dependent on if you're single or single plus one or family. I agree. I'm a single person who has to pay 80% of, or work pays 80, I pay 20, and I kind of think, oh, that's not fair, because a family, the hospital pays a lot more on somebody else's behalf than mine. So I think it's hard to break it down. I understand that an employee's, a one-person or rate is going to be a lot less than employee plus one, but I think that when you're looking at overall, it takes a village. I think sometimes the one person just kind of takes the 80% and pays their minor amount, because to me it's minor. But with that in mind, I would like to see, at first I was going to go big, and I would like to just see the flat rate of 85% for medical options for the equity ranges for 2014. But then I thought, no, that's big. But I would like to make a request in the budget if we could drop all the percentages drop all percentages 5%, except for not to let it go any lower than 75% that we have here. So, for instance, if you're looking on the presentation, it would be an employee would pay 85% for HMO. Employee plus one would pay 80%, and I'd leave the family at 75%. For the DHMO, the employee would pay 90%, which is, or the other backwards. Employee would pay 10%. Employee would pay 15%. Employee plus one, 15%. So two different things. One, perhaps, again, I'd like to see some numbers of what impact that would have on our budget. So you might go, Christy, you're digging up a hole that isn't worth digging, because you're really going to hurt the employee more than what you're going to save money. So I'd almost like to see what the dollar amount is on that, to see if it's worth it. And I would want to see that before the budget is approved, so that perhaps we could make that change.
Does someone else want to comment on Christie's proposed consensus to decrease the city and increase the employees' percentage of participation in the cost of health care? Is there a consensus to support Christie's suggestion that we study the issue prior to the budget cycle? Mr. Pons.
Question. I'd like to understand how big of an exercise it really is.
It's not huge. We can bring those numbers back, and then you guys can have those numbers for the budget hearing, and before you adopt the budget. It's not that big of a issue, and we can have comparisons of what other organizations are doing also, just so you have an idea. Because as I mentioned earlier, Heather actually, I think, brought me some recommended reductions in these percentages too, and we're still looking at that, so we could bring those back.
Additional comments?
Comfortable with looking at it. I really think we should.
Does anybody object to a consensus to ask staff to bring back the numbers associated with this? Hearing no objections, I believe you have your direction.
I would object, just because I think they've spent a lot of time on this, and this is just a recurring year after year. I think they really got a handle on what they're doing, and to me, it seems like it would be a big deal to change this last minute like this. If you want to look at it next year, I would say look at it for next year, but it just seems like, since we're coming, what's our deadline? November 1st?
Right.
Yeah, through November, or until
November.
Yeah. But that's just me.
So we have a suggestion that we take a look at this as part of the 2014 budget cycle by Ms. Davis, and one think that it's a longer-term proposition. Is that fair characterization? What do others? I'm getting a lot of shrugged shoulders.
Well, that's why I asked if it's Yeah, I mean, because I agree with Joey. If really it's going to be a hard exercise that may not yield us something right now. If that's not the case, and then I'm not as concerned about it. But I think it's a reasonable question.
It's not a difficult request, and honestly, we were going to look at it anyway and have those numbers. So, but it's up to you to make the decision if you want to do it this year or next year or not at all. So,
I am willing to get on board for looking at it as soon in light of that comment, and so I'm seeing. I don't see a consensus yet, Mr. Starker. And I haven't heard from Mr. Starker or Mr. Stites on this issue. I got a head nod out of Joyce.
If you were truly planning to look at it, and if it's really not a great deal of work for staff, then I think it would be helpful to do it this year, just perhaps so that we don't need to go through it again next year. Maybe we can get to a decision. But once again, if it creates a substantial amount of work, then I think that we should postpone it and do it. So I will defer to staff recommendation on that.
Mr. Stites, do you care to comment?
Well, it just depends upon can it be
done.
Can it be done?
Yeah, just bringing back the numbers. It can be done. It's a simple exercise.
I think that was consensus then.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll zip it for now.
You're done?
Yeah, in case someone doesn't bring the rest of the stuff. But I think they will.
Go ahead, Joe.
Other comments on Mr. DeMott?
I just have one. I guess you could call this a request. I know on the Ridge 38 plan, I know they're looking at $80,000 for events and things. I was on my first year on the Carnation Festival board, and I can tell you it is a huge undertaking. I can't say this enough times. It was unbelievable what they've really been doing year after year, and the Carnation Festival really is our festival. This is the city's festival. This is what, a lot of cities look at their festivals as defining times in their summertime events, and this really is our event with, sometimes up to 30,000 people coming over 2 nights, bands, and, the fireworks, bring them in. The final treasurer's report wasn't done for this year yet on there, and from what I understand, they haven't really asked for an increase for as long as most of the members could remember. And at $12,500, I can tell you are getting, that's a bargain. I'm sort of taking it upon myself to ask for an increase if we can look anywhere for any kind of increase. The festival appreciates all the in-kind support that they get from the city staff and especially the Parks Department. But unfortunately, like everything else, expenses just go up every single year. The renting of all the facilities, the equipment, even the trash removal went, actually it was donated most years. And it went up significantly this year. Just renting the fences and the gates and the carts and everything they need, it went up. The money they have in there now, we will basically expend in 2 to 3 years. And I just thought it'd be a great thing to keep it rolling, to keep it going. If we could somehow find, something, where I would like to say doubling the budget to 25,000, I would love to say would be enough, but, Wheat Ridge 2020 has submitted their budget on what they think their events are going to cost on 38th Avenue. Those are significantly smaller events, and just based on what they see, if their events are 80,000, we're spending a ton of money, so, I'd leave it up to staff right now. I'm not going to ask for a consensus because I haven't seen the final Carnation Festival Treasurer's Report, but if you can think of where or how or what might be a good number, maybe we can just talk, and maybe we can talk with some of the Carnation Festival board, or if anybody here knows anybody on the board, give them a call, see what they think. And I'm sure they would appreciate the help. What do you mean, combine the funds?
So we say, okay, we're gonna do 95,000, let's say.
Total.
Yeah, total, and then kind of divvy it out, just a thought. So that if the Carnation Festival does need more, then we can allocate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to,
I don't know how many.
I leave it open, I'm not gonna, it's really a different kind of things. But I mean, I can tell you, they've got, the track record of the Carnation Festival. You just bring in the Optimist Club, the Rotary Club, the Wheat Ridge High School comes in, and they they participate, the band, couple of the, a lot of the sports organization teams, parents. Of course, we could always use more volunteers, but
I think you make a good point, Joey, because we have added other things and have kind of not taken care of our own. And I do kind of think that's a valid point. And of course, we're paying out more money for the circus and carrying that more. Something does seem sort of a little out of balance. I realize these events are multiple events. It's not just one thing, but still, I see your point. And I think when that comes up again, that we will have the opportunity to say, hey, do we need to do something here? Try remembering your comments.
Thanks. And if it, just for perspective too, the $12,500 that we get from the city, that's the fireworks. I mean, that's it. That's what we pay for fireworks now. They do them 2 nights, and that's a 3rd, maybe 4th year they've done that. But I mean, it's over $12,000 just for the fireworks alone, which is a huge draw, huge. Probably one of the main attractions. So any ideas would be welcome. Thank you.
I certainly agree that we get more bang for the $12,500 out of that than some of the other places we put $12,500. I mean, the in-kind assistance is real too, but I'm certainly open to that. To me, that opens the broader question, is that we have this list of ads off, how we prioritize these larger asks, the Jefferson County School District Outdoor Lab, that's a good program. Jeffco EDC, I think we need to support that. Jeffco Action Center, I was incredibly impressed by their program when I looked at it last year, and I think we all support the Senior Resource Center, and I think we need to figure out what direction we're giving staff on all those points. And I don't, and then it's very difficult. We're fairly capped on the top end, so I don't know if I don't know how we want to have that dialogue as a group. I'd be interested in people's thoughts on, do we look at these individually, or do we say we probably we think we want to spend the total ask here on that particular list is $90,000. Do we think that we as a city want to spend $90,000 on those types of programs? And am I talking to myself? Do we want?
It's so hard to balance when you don't have enough, the following year for CIP, for street repairs, et cetera. It's a tough question. It really is.
I think I'd like to grind. I don't see any point on it tonight, but I'd like to grind on the drainage ask and some of those. But in front of us tonight, staff's asking for direction on specifically the outside agency contributions and then these specific things.
So Dave, it's just one other thing on that.
Sure.
As, because I do think there's other places we can nip. I do support the rigid 38th, but I mean, is this their pie in the sky number, or what, you know, what is a different number? I mean, I think we've all done budgets before where, okay, I can tell you what I want, and then I can tell you what, you know, what I'd be happy with or what I need. But I do think there's a lot of numbers there that could transfer over to some of those Senior Resource Center, Jeffco, and those types of things that we could nip something in one place so that we can support some of those programs.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, I was trying to look at the lists. My bad.
You know, I, excuse me, agree totally. I think we're at a particular point with this budget where we better start getting real and really take a look at what is necessary and what isn't, because it's getting to a scary point. But you look at the ridge at 38th, 8th, you know, what are we crossing over with our economic development department? You got marketing materials, can't our economic guru do it? The district feasibility study, does that have to be done next year? You have $80,000 for public events, and you come down here and you got live local events at $40,000. That's $120,000 for events on 38th. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Banners and lighting program for half the street, because we still haven't figured out the light poles west of Harlan, what we can do with those. That's a lot of money for half a street, or actually a quarter of a street. So I think we need to, I would challenge everybody in here to go through this budget. Try to find, you know, if it's 50,000, super. If it's 20,000, super. But we have got to whittle this thing down and get it manageable. You know, we've got a lot of requests for money. The problem with it is, I think we're at the particular point where we need to start spending it on Wheat Ridge and not a lot of other things. But I would really challenge people to go through there and find, you know, if it's $5,000, 10,000, you know, whatever. But I see right here, you know, 120,000 for public events next year on 38th Avenue. That's a lot of money, a lot of money.
Or 40 of that's for the whole city. That's the live well.
But, you know, so marketing and materials, websites, 35,000 to 2020. Our economic department should be doing that.
Well, we have an IT person for website, don't we? I just saw.
Not to build, no, our website is contracted out too with the city. This website is what, I think we sent an email out to you recently. It just came live. This is specifically to 38th Avenue. They've hired. Okay.
And then you have the corridor and marketing map and directory at 7,000. Heidi did it for free on 44th Avenue, and I think it cost her, what, $2,000? If that, and she paid for it herself. So I think there's just a lot of stuff in here that we could cut back or eliminate, but we really got to take a look at it and see really what do we need to do next year. And boy, I tell you, to me, it's getting scary. And we need to somehow whittle this thing back and find out what truly is necessary and what isn't.
I could one time real quick too, if nobody else has anything. The Wheat Ridge Business District, we did receive, I think it was 70,000 last year, or was it 90? Was it 90 last year also, and it looks like there's 90 in there. I don't know our exact budget number, but we have not had the request for grants that we had, you know, 3 and 4 years ago, we actually had to come back and ask for more money because the requests were coming in so fast. I think we have $56,000 left of last year's. And so even if we put half of it into, I think if we could receive half up front, and then we're doing a lot of outreach, and we did change our brochures, and we're doing a little more, trying to give away money as fast as we can. But, the fact is it's a matching grant, so they still have to spend money to get the money, and it's just, people just don't have it yet. So I'd say in that, you know, I hope I'm not overstepping the rest of the board by saying that, you know, I think if we did half of that, we'd be more than happy.
And this council's always been sympathetic if you came back when you had, we've always been sympathetic if you came back when you had valuable programs to bring us.
With that, because otherwise we're pushing to give it away.
Mr. Pons?
Well, I just want to stay on point. I do want to come back and make general comments after we round
Sure.
this topic, which if you know, it looks like there's 30,000 of this 90,000 that could be actionable this year. There's a note to that effect in here. And if in fact that works, which is to say that can be done this year, then we're talking about, you know, trying to if we would agree to all these things, to try to take 60,000 by looking at some savings in some line items through the budget. You know, I don't agree, and I will get back to that in my general comments. I don't agree with you know, with just pillaging some of these buckets, but I do agree that some balancing to try to take into account these additional items would be beneficial.
I guess do we want to do we even want to try and look at the individual line items at this time, or do we want to defer that discussion for tonight? Or
well, let me ask a question to make sure I kind of understand where we are. If we're on the page that's on the goal number 1, economic viable commercial corridors, and we've got the rigid 38, public events at 80 grand, and street improvements at 25, and corridor marketing at 7, going on down the list. It would seem to me, and I agree with Mr. Stites, that if we were able to do maybe some judicious cutting in those budgets, that we might be able to come up with some, you know, without cutting them to the bone, still have some meaningful financing for these activities, but find some other money that would be available for some of the other uses that we look for in the city. You know, like Joe was mentioning in the Carnation Festival, and you know, maybe. And I started at the bottom because you started there, Joe, on the Wheat Ridge Business District. I mean, if we went from 90 down to 50 and you pick up 40, and I don't know what the right numbers are, but if we went there and live local, if you said, well, let's make, instead of 40, let's make it 30 and pick up 10 there. If you went up to the city marketing position, instead of 15, went 10 and picked up 5 there, and the citywide public relations, instead of 10 or 20, we did 10 there and picked up 10 there.
so give you a bucket.
You know, and let's see, in the district feasibility study, I mean, would 15,000 do that, or is it sort of 20 or nothing? Banners and lighting, if we, you know, we've got 25 allocated to it, can we do something for 15 or 20, you know, for 15 or 20,000, pick up 5 or 10 there? I think there's probably $80,000 or $90,000 kind of in that goal number 1 that we may be able to come up with.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
You guys were having a side conversation, so you didn't hear what we were talking
Sorry,
about.
Mr.
So
Starker.
that's okay. I'm going to let you respond to it anyway.
I heard it all.
I didn't.
No, I had a suggestion for the chair, actually. If there's things on these lists and things that you've brought up that you think are legitimate to add into the budget, let me know. I'll figure out how to make them in the budget by making cuts, and then we'll bring that back to you. So if you think these things on this list are something you want to see in the budget, let me know. If not, we'll scratch it off. But if, like,
You're talking about the extras.
yeah, Jeff Coaction said, if you think that needs to be in there, we'll figure out how to make it fit in there, and figure out how to trim back somewhere else.
Well, let me try and bracket it. First of all, the basic sheet of outside agencies that we've always funded, is there a consensus that the staff recommendation for funding, and I'm talking now about about the Arapahoe House, the ones that we've consistently functioned, and it's 10,000 total suggestion by staff. Do we think that that grouping is something that we have a consensus for? Does council feel that's an appropriate amount of money to fund that collection of 7 agencies? Optimist, Senior Resource Center generally, Ralston.
We had a total request of 27,000. We have 10,000 in the budget.
Is
can decide
council comfortable with that range, Ms. Stites?
I would leave that at 10,000.
Is there,
Our general 10,000 that we do every year.
Yeah.
all right.
And divide it up.
Anybody object to that being the budget number? Keeping in mind we can always adjust to specific needs of any that come later.
I'm comfortable with that, 10.
Hearing no objection, we know that. I'm going to try the additional ads. Do we believe that it is within our mandate to fund Jefferson County School District Outdoor Lab Program?
I would say no.
That
That's what I'm thinking. If we're,
Have we ever?
Our areas have.
I'm with Mr. Stites, and I'm sorry, I'm the chair, I forgot.
Other communities are, some aren't. Edgewater, I know, funded all of theirs, but not everybody's funding it.
But it is for the children in our community that have like a low, free and reduced lunch. So it's not like we're just funding a general bucket for any Jefferson County child. We're funding the children in our community.
Yeah, that number is specifically based on our census and that are low and mod.
That's how they computed it. The dollars are just go into the big bucket.
Yeah, they do. Well, they would go to those schools. We can actually send a check to our schools specifically for those kids. It doesn't go back into the big bucket.
So it's not in the $1 billion Jeffco Ed budget?
No.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it.
Well, no, if it's like that, which, I think is pretty clear here, then I would support maintaining this level of support.
It's a new budget item for us. We've never. I heard something different.
24.5.
That's a new
Thank you.
request.
I understand.
Okay, I was
Not
making.
change the number. You talked about having it. I'm saying keep it the same.
It was clarity, not objection. I was trying to understand the ask. So Ms. Davis's thought was half of that number. Mr. Pons says that number.
Well, and I do think, again, the emphasis is that it is based off of our students, correct? So let me ask you, Patrick, so let's say, for instance, it comes time for outdoor lab and we actually have 100 people. Does that mean we'll just pay $171 per student? Because I figured it out earlier today. It's 171 something.
Just a number.
Yeah, and the rate varies by school depending on the number of children. And we actually have a census. There's like Wheat Ridge Middle has 52, and the rate for those kids are $100 a piece because their general population is high for low to mod. But then you go to Prospect Valley, there's only 20 kids there, and their rate is $350 per kid because they're higher. So they raise funds from outside sources to the private sector for this program too. So if we didn't give the full amount, doesn't mean our kids wouldn't have a chance to go. It's just any funds they get helps the program succeed.
Since we've never done this before, and we're cutting other areas in order to do it, I'm happy with going with half of the amount that's suggested.
Mr. Starker?
In looking at budgetary things, there's programs and users that we vote for and vote against. I guess if it was a case of being able to send our children up to outdoor lab, my kids had a beneficial time there. I thought it was a great program, and I would support that. Just going down the list, if we're talking about it, I think if we give $6,600 to Jeffco EDC, I would probably not support an additional. I now know they're on a fundraising thing, and I know that's important, but I think we have other priorities. On the Action Center, I probably would cut some money out of that, and on the Resource Center, I probably would not augment the additional 12,000, I think $30,000 for the circulator bus is a good contribution. So I would sort of go part and part, but, that's part of the budget process.
All right, I'm gonna skip the first one because I think I couldn't hear anything even approaching consensus. So we'll go on to Jeffco EDC. I agree with Mr. Starker for the extent that would there be an agreement in the consensus to continue with our current level of participation in the Jeffco EDC? Does anybody object to that? Okay. Is there I'm going to skip to the senior circulator bus because we've discussed that one before, and I think everybody knows the dialogue we've had. So I also support Mr. Starker's at maintaining at the existing level. Is there a consensus to do that? Okay. So we've nailed to the Jeffco Action Center is a new ask of us, and that's a big number to me. And while I'm very sympathetic, I was extremely impressed by their program. It does bother me to be contributing to somebody else's capital improvement programs when we're not contributing to our own capital improvement programs. And I'd love some. I don't want to say a token contribution to recognize the validity of their program, but at this point, Mr. Pont?
I mean, I agree with the logic of that, and regardless, would say whatever we do, we try to do it with the appropriation this year and not push this to the 2014 budget. So, whatever number we reach, we should be looking to see if we can make some contribution, even if it's a lesser amount, but not put it in the 2014 budget. Keep it as an appropriation this year if we have it, and if we don't, we don't.
It would require a supplemental to do it this year. We can wait till the end of the year and see if we have any money left over.
Ms. Pond suggests that we go with that as a starting point, because we can always, Miss Davis, that would be Mr. Pons, and Miss Davis suggested $10,000 for that item. Is that something that the rest of council could support at this point in time?
I just wrote down 10, that's funny.
You look like Mr. Starker would like to comment.
I guess I'm not familiar with this program, so is this being built, I assume in Jeffco, but
their current facility is associated with the church. They have, I can't remember the number, it was some outrageous number. Almost all of their program is volunteer, and they work with low-income people, trying to get them back into the community and working on. Their volunteer donor pool was huge, but they're looking for a capital program so their facility can better serve the community they serve, which is the bottom of the underserved and people that have fallen out of housing.
And their motto is a pathway to self-sufficiency. So
I just pulled that up.
Sorry, I stole your thunder? It's very limited, I think, assistance. Like I know food, they have a food bank. Anyone that applies is only allowed up to 5 weeks of food in a annual time period. So they really try to get them back to a self-sufficient place in their life.
And is this a capital campaign for a new bricks and mortars, a new building?
It's to expand their current building where they're at today. They bought an office building in the last couple of years to expand into right next to them. They're on just off of Colfax and 14th and Estes. And they're actually looking to partner with MCPN, that's where MCPN's old clinic was. They're right across the street from them. So they're looking to partner with them. They have, I think, their total campaign is just, I think, over $4 million in 2 phases. The first phase is a couple million to redo the office building they bought. They're going to move in there. Then they're going to come back, and the second phase is to redo where they currently are to expand their services. I think their total campaign is about $5 million for over a 2-year period.
And we really don't have, in the county as a whole, so Denver has some programs at that sort of level, bottom out. So I don't know. I would encourage council to do something with this one, and I'm comfortable.
Well, did we throw out $10,000?
We did.
I would support that.
Okay. All right. So that
was that it.
That was it. The only one we didn't close the loop on was out was the outdoor?
Davis, was that, I'm sorry, was that a consensus? 10,000?
I thought it was, yes.
Okay.
I was counting
Sorry,
on nods,
okay.
my bad. No, it was- I think I got all
Do
nods.
you want to do that this year if we can find the money, or just budget it for next year?
Budget it for next
Budget it?
Budget for next year
Okay.
was my understanding.
year. If not, they'll be asking.
One more try at hitting being the engineer in the group, I'm going to throw out there for concept half of the number on the Jesco School Outdoor Lab that was in the request, and see, just to have a number on the table for, can I get the head nods that that's a good starting point for that one? Mr. DeMott doesn't look happy.
I'm just curious, is this like an all or nothing kind of thing? I mean, I'm not, my
don't
kids
know.
aren't old enough yet to be going there. They will be in 4 years. But, I mean, generally, the kids, the families pay their part to go, and this is to assist the people who can't, right?
Who can't,
Correct.
right. And I guess the other question would be, if we did say, okay, let's do 12,250, would there be an ask, I guess, if they're like,
Kids.
we didn't raise enough money, can we have another 5,000?
Anybody can come and ask again anytime they want.
I think they would appreciate anything you gave them. I don't know if they would come back and ask, but I can't guarantee that. I mean, they're really not really pushing this that hard either. Cindy Stevenson gave us a memo, and
Okay, so
she said, whatever you can give.
Go.
let's do
10.
10. Again, all
Go,
these people.
10 going once. Mr. Pons looks like he's chewing on something pretty hard. Is he saving it for general comments? I thought so. All right. Do we have any other moving pads? Was that all of them?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that Jeffco EDC, so do not increase by the, okay.
That's what I heard and saw nods for. Anyone want to delve in any other portion of the budget at this time?
I've talked too much.
Ms. J. Ms. J.
I would like to entertain the idea, we're talking about the rest of the budget now, right?
Right.
That, I don't know what vehicle replacement we're actually doing this year, but that when we do that, and if it is vehicles, that we try to look at vehicles that are hybrids or something like that, as well as maybe think about talking to other cities that are also having to purchase vehicles. And I've heard of cities that do some group buying and where they get a better rates because, maybe we need 5 and they need 5 and something like that. That's the only thing I'm requesting, is that be looked at as a possibility to get us better pricing and environmentally and save on our gasoline.
We do purchase all of our vehicles off a state bid, so we get competitive bidding. We get really good prices, so that's definitely good. And we are actually getting a hybrid sedan is
Hey.
replacing one of the police vehicles next year, so we're starting to get into the hybrid.
Gosh, that was refilled already.
And I know in our 5-year plan, I know more of the vehicles are going to be replaced with a alternative fuel or hybrid versions. They're starting to become more cost-effective and
Right.
and the understate bid too, which they never were before. So
Additional specific items? I think we're up to, if we've nailed all the specific items, I guess we're up to anybody broader general comments. Mr. Pond?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I suppose, normal and fine for us to go through and look at some of these buckets. But I suppose the thing, and I'll use Mike's term, this is scary, right? But it's not, what's not scary is a couple $100,000 here or there, which represents 1/10 of a percentage point of our general operating budget. What's much more impactful as I look at this budget are the millions of dollars that we have a problem with. And I suppose we've talked about it, but we haven't done anything about it. And that's what's really scary. I'm not scared about, I may not agree with $10,000 here or $10,000 there But frankly, that's almost meaningless to the larger discussion. We have a CIP issue, you know, and we're making our last move. We're making our last move on reserves, and we will have and we will be looking at essentially no money to do something after this year. That's a multi-million-dollar problem, not a couple $100,000. You know, and Joyce brought up issues that I think, you know, to some extent I know, but these are across the board preventative maintenance and facilities issues that we have that we have been in a deferred maintenance role for a number of years, and you know, it's just a matter of time. This is gonna crush us. You know, finding other buckets of money to do maintenance on a rec center where the rec center fund budget really only has a 4 or 5 year lifespan right now based on return rate of that fund. That's scary. That's a huge deal. So, you know, and we're not meeting the needs of our community based on what we've heard. We heard budget comments. People came in and talked about what was important. We heard that prior to our council retreat. And we are not really addressing those here. You know, it may look like it, but we're just kind of barely putting cover over some of these issues, and there's no sustainability in it. You know, so I think we're barely taking care of our people, and I mean that we're barely taking care of staff. You know, we'll be good if we're average. You know, we're barely taking care of our citizens. We're barely taking care of our resources. And I don't think we're meeting the expectations of this community. So again, I think it's totally normal for us to sit here and talk about $20,000 here and $10,000 there. But I hope we're not doing that and avoiding the larger issue. And we can't stop talking about it because it's not fair for people to see us looking like we're doing good work and arguing about $10,000 when we're ignoring the millions of dollars that are problematic in this budget.
Other general comments? I have just one. I think I know the answer, but I would like to point out that we are drawing down to the specified minimum in the reserve this year at 17%. And I just would like to, and I think that's a reasonable thing to do, but it did occur to me that we might want to take the stance, and when I look at this budget, the only place we could go with that idea was to say maybe in recognition that something might come up during the year, that we would preserve a larger number than the bare minimum we've set in our reserve policy, and stop at, you know, I don't know, pick one, 19, 20, that there might be some other number in the reserves this year to give us a little more room the year behind on budget. And I didn't know if anybody else was even contemplating that, or if we've set this as the bottom of the reserve and we're going to go to that this year which is what was proposed to us. Did anybody want to weigh in on that? We're comfortable with 17? Let me try it this way then. Is there a consensus that the 17 that was proposed by staff is the right number to stop at the reserve for this year? That sounds like my answer.
I do want to comment on George's,
Go ahead.
what George said,
Okay.
which bears with the reserve and everything. I do think we need to get serious about what we're going to do to increase our income. What are we going to do to increase our sustainability? And yeah, we are messing with some numbers around here, and that's all well and good. But I think we really need to put our heads together and say, seriously, what does this city need and how can we accomplish it? I mean, we do a strategic planning session, and what has to come out of that is some really strong goals about how we're going to turn this city around. And yes, we have a couple of new developments coming, and they're down the line a piece, and they may generate some income, but, you know, when we have to give tax breaks, et cetera, you can't expect that to start roaring in. That's down the road a piece. So I think part of this should be a plan to how we're going to come together and make this really work. So that when you look at the fact that our increase in percentage of how much more we got in income this year compared to other cities is really pretty minimal. I mean, they're talking double digit, and we're sitting here with, what, 3% or something like that? And we have to look at that if we're going to be doing a good job as a council to pull that off. And I would suggest that we set a date that on certain time that we get together, and that is what our goal is how are we going to solve these problems, which are huge and real, and looking like they're getting worse.
I recognize both the sets of comments. I'd also think the agenda item for tonight is the 2014 budget as well, and that's we're trying to do the best we can with the tools on the table on this issue, and I also acknowledge the structural long-term problem that we have to find a way to address, and you know, I don't think there's enough cuts to be had in this budget to address that structural weakness myself. But tonight's topic is what we can do with what we have in 2014. And,
I agree.
Yeah. So, any last call for comments, questions? Is there a unanimous consent to what's the word? Adjourn the meeting? Hearing no objections.